the Billionaire story out of the Ringing Cedars series, book 8.1, The New Civilization by Vladimir Meager, chapter 7. Uh, See the picture of like this mirror, like this outer mirror of life. It's like inner outer mirror, the new civilization. The Billionaire story. Billionaire John Heitzman was dying on the 42nd story of his office tower. The whole floor had been converted into his personal apartment. 2 bedrooms, a workout gym, a swimming pool, a dining room, and 2 studies had comprised his refuge for the past 3 years. During this time, he had not left his apartment even once. Not once had he taken the express lift down to where the core of his financial and industrial empire was in full operation. Not once had he gone up to the roof where his personal helicopter was on standby, replete with a full crew awaiting his command. 3 times a week, John Heisman retreated to one of his studies to receive 4 of his closest associates. At these brief sessions, which lasted no more than 40 minutes, he listened to their reports with some indifference and occasionally issued brief instructions. The book value of the empire under his exclusive control kept increasing by an average of 16.5% annually, even over the past 6 months when Heisman ceased convening even his tri-weekly sessions altogether. The ledger showed no decline in profits. The system he had created continued to run smoothly with no glitches. Nobody knew the billionaire's true financial worth. His name was hardly ever mentioned in the press. Heitzman held strictly to the rule: money hates trouble. As a young man, he had been admonished by his father along these lines: let those upstart politicians strut their stuff off the TV screens and in the pages of the press. Let the presidents and governors spout their addresses to the people, assuring them all is well. Let the billionaires in the public eye go gallivanting about the country with their fancy cars and bodyguards. That is not a course, my dear John, you yourself should follow. You should always remain in the shadows and use your power, the power of money, to control governments and presidents, the wealthy and the poor, in a variety of different countries, but they must never guess who is controlling them. The plan is simple in the extreme. I was the one who created the monetary fund, which lists the names of many different investors. In fact, 70% of the fund's capital has been invested by me under different names. On the surface, as far as the dimwit masses are concerned, the fund was created for the support of developing countries. In actual fact, I created it as a device for collecting tribute money from all the countries involved. Here's an example. Let's say an armed conflict breaks out between 2 sides. One of them, more often both, needs money. Let them have it. It will be repaid with interest, or some country is experiencing a social upheaval and again money is required. Let them have it. They will be repaid with interest. Or 2 political forces come into conflict. One of them will get money through our agents, and one, once again, it will be repaid with interest. Russia alone pays us an annual sum of $3 billion. At age 20, John Heitzman had especially enjoyed these discussions with his father. Despite his early severity and reticence to talk, one day the father summoned John to his office and invited him to make himself comfortable in a soft armchair by the fireplace, while he himself poured a cup of his son's favorite coffee with cream and asked with a spark of genuine interest, how are your college studies going, John? They're not always that interesting, Dad. I get the feeling the professors aren't too good at giving a clear and comprehensible explanation of the laws of economics. Good and apt assessment, but more precisely, professors today can't explain the laws of economics because they haven't the faintest idea of them themselves. They think economics is the domain of economists, but it isn't. World economics is under the control of psychologists, philosophers, and high stakes players. When I was 20, my father, your granddad John, let me into the secrets of the management process. Now that you're 20, I think you're worthy of inheriting this knowledge. Thanks, Dad, replied John. Thus began, in these fireside chats, lessons in the laws of economics one never hears about at university. The father taught his son using his own unique method. The whole educational process was conducted in these heart to heart conversations on a good natured tone with examples and elements of play. The information the senior Heitzman revealed to his son was astounding. There was no way one could obtain it anywhere else, even in the most prestigious universities in the world. Tell me, John, asked the father, do you know how many wealthy people there are in our country or in the world? Their names are listed in business journals in order of their estate value, replied John calmly. And where do we rank in these lists? This was the first time father had used we instead of I. That meant he already considered him, John, a full partner. While he did not want to offend his father, John replied, your name, father, isn't included in these lists. Yes, you're right. I'm not there. Even though you are even though just our annual profit alone amounts to more than the whole estates many many included in the list, and my name isn't there because one's wallet should not be transparent. Many of these people work either directly or indirectly for our empire, for yours and mine, son. Dad, you must be a genius at economics. I can't even imagine how you can make such a huge empire pay us tribute money every year without military intervention. You've managed to set up such a tremendous economic operation. The senior Heitzman took a pair of fire tongs and gave a poke to the logs on the hearth. Then, without a word, he poured 2 glasses of light wine for his son and himself. It was only after his first wee sip that he finished explaining. You know, I didn't set up any operation at all. The capital under my control simply allows me to give orders, and others carry them out. My analysis and government experts in various countries, even their presidents, would be astonished to learn that the current situation in their countries is not determined by their own actions, but rather by my will. Political technology centers, economics institutes, analytical think tanks, and government agencies in many countries. None of them are aware that they're working along strict guidelines laid down by my departments, and I don't have all that many employees. For example, all of Russia's socio-economic policy and its military doctrine are determined and controlled by one department comprising four psychologists. Each psychologist has 4 secretaries. No, not one of them knows about the activities of the others. I'll tell you how the control system works. It's really quite simple. But first, John, you should understand the true laws of economics, which you'll never get from any college professor. Professors don't even know they exist. Here's a law. In the conditions of a democratic society, presidents, governments, banks, as well as major and minor entrepreneurs in all countries work for a single entrepreneur who stands at the top of the economic pyramid. They worked for my father. Now they're working for me, and soon they'll be working exclusively for you. John Heitzman looked at his father and could scarcely take it all in. Certainly, he knew that his father was rich, but here they were talking about much more than riches. They were talking about supreme power, which was now going to be passed by inheritance to him, John. All this incredible information still had not sunk in completely. He could, how could it be that in a free and democratic society, everyone from presidents on down to the hundreds of thousands of firms, both major and minor, supposedly all separate legal entities, were in fact working for just one man, namely his father? When I first heard from your granddad what I had just now shared with you, I had a hard time figuring it all out. Right now, John, you're probably in the same boat. But let me make one thing perfectly clear, the elder Heitzman went on. There are wealthy people in this world, but for every wealthy person there is someone even wealthier, and that is one who is and there is one who is wealthiest of all. All the other wealthy people, and consequently all the people under their control, work for him, the one who is the wealthiest of all. This is the law of the system under which we live. All this talk of unselfish aid to developing countries is nothing but a bluff. Sure, wealthy countries grant credit to developing countries through international funds, but in fact, they do that simply to get back a healthy amount of interest in return for using their credit. In other words, to collect tribute money. Russia, for example, pays $3 billion a year to the IMF. And this amount only represents the interest on the credit allotted to Russia. Many economists are aware that the basic financing for the IMF is provided by American capital. They realize that the extortionate interest rates on credit use is siphoned off to the USA. But who they go to specifically, nobody knows. America as a country is simply a convenient shield in the capital game, and it is dependent on capital more than any other nation. Tell me, John, did you know that America has a national debt? Yes, Dad, I know. It's an astronomical figure. Just last year it amounted to, and servicing the debt cost. So that means you realize that a country which loans to other countries at the same rate takes out huge loans itself through its own Federal Reserve. And who does it belong to? This Federal Reserve. John had never thought about whom America was in debt to, but as he tried to answer his father's question, it suddenly dawned on him: the United States of America. Every taxpayer pays in the United States of America. Every taxpayer pays into the Federal Reserve. The Federal Reserve of the USA is a private bank, and consequently, all America is paying hundreds of billions of dollars to private individuals, or to a single individual. John Heitzman had never been flustered in his life. He led, as they say, a healthy lifestyle. He did not drink or smoke. He managed a healthful diet and worked out every day in his private gymnasium. Only in the past 6 months he had stopped going to the gym. He had spent these 6 months lying in bed in one of his spacious bedrooms, crammed full with state-of-the-art medical equipment. Doctors maintain on-call shifts around the clock in the next room. But John Heitzman did not trust modern medical science. He felt no need of even talking with his doctors. There was one professor of psychology, however, that he occasionally deigned to favor with brief answers. Heitzman did not even care to know his doctor's names, including the name of this professor, though he did make a note to himself that he was the most sincere and honest of the lot. The professor talked a good deal, but what he said often included not just medical assertions, but also reasonings and a desire to determine the causes of a disease. One day he came in all excited and announced right at the doorway, "I spent all last night and all this morning thinking about your condition. I think I've discovered the cause of your illness. This means that once we remove the cause, we can talk about a pretty quick recovery." "Oh, sorry, Mr. Heitzman, I forgot to say hello." "Good afternoon, Mr. Heitzman. I got a bit carried away with my ideas." The billionaire did not answer the professor's greeting or even turn in his direction, but that was how he treated all his doctors, and sometimes he would make a gesture to a doctor who had just entered the room, just a slight movement with his hand, which they all knew meant go away. Not perceiving any such gestures this time, the professor kept on explaining excitedly as follows: "I do not agree with my colleagues on the need to transplant your liver, kidneys, and heart. Granted, these organs of yours are functioning up to par at the moment." "No, sir, not up to par, that's a fact, but neither will transplanted organs. The reason they're not up to par lies in your extreme depression." "Yes, sir, in your extreme depression. I've gone over your medical history quite a few times now, and I think I've made a major discovery. Your attending physician, he's a really great guy. He wrote down everything in detail, every single time he noted your mental condition. Your internal organs would always start to fail the moment you got into a depressive state." "Yes, sir, quite a state." Now here comes the $64,000 question. Is the failure of your internal organs causing the depression, or the other way around? Is the depression causing organ failure throughout your body? I'm absolutely convinced that the depression is the original cause. Yes, sir. It's your extreme depression. It's a condition where someone ceases to strive for any goal. He loses interest in what's going on around him. He doesn't see any sense in living. And then the brain begins to transmit only half-hearted commands to the whole body. And I mean the whole of it. The stronger the depression, the weaker the commands. At certain level, the brain may cease giving these commands altogether. And then comes death. So the ultimate cause is depression. And as for eliminating it entirely, well, that's something modern medicine has no answer for. So I turned to folk medicine. And now I'm convinced that your extreme depression is the result of a curse. Yes, sir. More specifically, someone's put a spell on you, and I'm prepared to back that up with quite a number of facts. The billionaire was about to make his go away gesture. He disliked all such esoteric healers, people who promised to exorcise demons and take away spells or set a defense against them, people he considered petty operators or swindlers. No doubt the professor was on the rebound from the ineffectiveness of modern medicine, but he thought and so had fallen to the level of these so-called healers. But the billionaire did not manage to execute the gesture. The professor headed him off with words evoking just a smidgen of interest, but increasingly all the same. But interestingly all the same. "I have the feeling you're getting ready to send me away, maybe for good. I ask you, no, I beg you, give me just 5 more or 6 more minutes. It's very possible that once you've understood what I have to say, you'll make a full recovery, and I'll make an important discovery. Rather, I've already made it. I just need to have it confirmed once and for all." The billionaire did not make his go away gesture. For 3 whole seconds the professor stared at Heitzman's motionless hand and realized he could continue, which he did. at rapid fire pace. People look at each other differently. Sometimes we with indifference, other times with love or hate or envy or fear or respect. But it's not the outward expression of the eyes that is the main factor here. The outward appearance can be just an ordinary mask, like the fake smile of a waiter or a salesman. What's important are the true attitudes, the true feelings one person harbors towards another. The more positive emotions people express towards a particular individual, the more positive energy is concentrated in him. On the other hand, if negative emotions predominate in the atmosphere surrounding a person, he will experience an accumulation of negative and destructive energy. Among the common folk, this is called a spell, and a folk healers base and folk healers base their actions on this phenomena. By no means all folk healers are charlatans. The whole point is that a person who has been the target of this of too much negative energy from those around him is himself capable of neutralizing it, or, in other words, compensating for it by telling the patient that he has removed the spell by certain types of actions. The healer helps him believe that he is cleansed. If the patient believes the healer, he is really evening out the balance within himself between the positive and the negative. If he doesn't believe, it won't happen. You don't believe in folk healers, and consequently, they won't be of any help for you. But that isn't to say that you don't have an excess of negative energy, which is destructive to your mind and body. Why negative? Precisely because a man in your position can only be looked upon by people around you with resentment. And I don't mean just a bit of harmless envy. They might look at you, or more specifically treat you with hatred. People you've fired or haven't given a raise to. A lot of people feel your power and react with fear. You see, all that amounts to negative energy. To counteract it, you need positive energy. This can be supplied by family members or relatives, but your wives have run out on you, and you don't have any children or friends, and you don't communicate with your relatives. You have no source of positive energy around you. Now, an individual human being is capable of producing positive energy and in sufficient quantity within himself, all on his own. But for this, he needs to set his heart on some kind of dream or goal, and the step by step realization of this goal will bring about positive emotions. You are already you've already achieved so much in life that now it seems you don't have any more goals or dreams left. And pause there. But it's extremely important to have such a goal and to strive to attain it. I have analyzed the physical and mental health of different types of business people. Someone who likes mixing dough and baking pies and sells them is happy that he can now afford to buy something he needs and dreams of developing his business. After all, it's only with development that he receives many of the goods and services civilization has to offer. A bank manager or the owner of a profit making concern likewise strives to develop his business, strives for increased profits, but often with less enthusiasm than someone who makes and sells pies. It's paradoxical, but true. The enthusiasm just isn't as great. It isn't as great because he's got significantly fewer tempting benefits ahead of him than the pie salesman. For him, the achievements of civilization have no special value. They're just routine. If someone with a relatively modest income suddenly has the chance to buy a car, the purchase of the car will evoke in him a tremendous feeling of satisfaction or even ecstasy. While someone who is relatively well off won't get a thrill from a brand new car. To him, It's a mere trifle. Paradoxical, but true, rich people have fewer occasions for delight than those less well off. There's one other factor that can bring satisfaction beating one's competition. But you, Mr. Heitzman, it seems, have no competition at all. So it turns out you have only negative energy acting upon you, and that's a great deal, and there's a great deal of it out there. Oh, and I forgot to mention, there's just one force that can conquer the masses of negative energy. Just one, but it's powerful, incredibly powerful. It's called the energy of love. It's when you find yourself in a state of love and someone loves you. Unfortunately, in your case, however, you don't have any woman in your life. In fact, it looks like you don't really have any interest in them at all. And at your age and in your condition, you're not likely to have any more interest in women. There's a lot of evidence to back up my conclusion. I've compared the longevity stats of rich people, prominent politicians, and presidents over the past 100 years. The results are quite persuasive. Longevity for the world's power brokers doesn't look at all that great by comparison with the common folk. In fact, often it's less. Paradoxical but true. Facts are facts. Presidents and millionaires, in spite of being under constant medical care, in spite of having access to the state of the art technical help and medicines, and to only the highest quality foodstuffs, are getting sick and dying just like anyone else. All this is eloquent testimony to the fact that surrounding negative energy exerts a colossal influence, and no medical science, even the very latest, is able to counteract it. So, what's the bottom line? A dead end situation? There is a way out. It may be small. It may be only one of its kind, but it's there. Yes, sir, it's there. Memories. My dear Mr. Heitzman, please try to remember the different stages of your life, any memory that will bring back pleasant feelings. Most importantly, if there's anyone you've given a serious promise to and not carried it out, see if there's any way you can carry it out now. I ask you, for your own sake, for the sake of science, to take at least 2 or 3 days and try to remember the good moments in your life. We've got equipment to monitor the function of many of your body organs. The monitoring goes on minute by minute. If you do what I'm recommending, and if these instruments start indicating positive results, there's indeed a chance we'll be able to see you through to full recovery. Yes, sir, you'll make it. I'll certainly find a way. Or maybe you'll find it on your own. Or maybe it'll just come all by itself. Your life will come across it on its own. The professor fell silent and once again fixed his gaze on the hand of his patient, lying motionless before him. A few seconds later, and the customary gesture sent the professor out of the room. Like many people, John Heitzman began to recall his past. He had at least something of an understanding of what the professor had said to him. He could try to find happy moments from his past life, and they might have a positive effect. The problem was, though, that everything he had experienced in his life seemed not just devoid of anything pleasant, it was uninteresting and even senseless. Heitzman remembered how he took his father's advice and married the daughter of a billionaire, thereby adding to his empire's wealth. The marriage did not bring him any satisfaction. His wife turned out to be barren, and after 10 years of conjugal life, she died of an overdose of narcotics. Then he married a famous fashion model who was the very picture of a wife passionately in love. But just 6 months after the wedding, His security service showed him snapshots of his wife cavorting with her former lover. He was not about to discuss it with her. He simply gave the orders to his bodyguards to see to it that he would never have the occasion to see or be reminded about her again. By now, in his recollections, Heitzman had reached the starting point of his participation in his father's empire. He had not been able to pinpoint even one pleasant instance that he felt like holding on to and use as a source of positive emotions. There was just one moment of pleasantness that he could remember. It was when he proved to his father that there was no need of becoming the sole owner of the monetary fund. Other investors in the fund, looking for a good return, would devote their mental energy to increasing the fund's capital and thus would be working for them. For the Heitzmans, his father took some time to think about this. Then, several days later at dinner time, he broke with his customary reticence to offer praise and said, "I agree with your proposal, John, regarding the fund. You are on the right track. Congratulations. Go ahead and give some thought to other areas too. It's time for you to take over the reins." For the next several days, John Heitzman was in an upbeat mood. He ended up making several more decisions and increasing the profits of their financial industrial empire even more. However, he no longer derived any special feeling of joy from this. The reports of increased profits were cold and dispassionate. No further praise would be coming his way. His father died, and praise from underlings brought no particular pleasure. John Heitzman continued going back to his recollection and reached to the time of his childhood. The rare moments of contact with his father were dimly illumined in his thought. Um, his ever strict father, as a rule, would issue admonishments in the presence of nannies and teachers, and which he had hired for young John. Then, all at once, a wave of warmth rolled through the body of the billionaire, lying motionless in his bed. His body gave a pleasant shiver. In Heitzman's recollections, the curtain rose on a very bright and very clear scene. He saw a far corner of the garden of his family's estate, and there, surrounded by a small acacia bushes, a little house about 2 meters high, with a single window. For some quite inexplicable reason, all children yearn to create their own little house, their own space. That yearning is there, no matter whether the child has his own room in his parents' house or lives in the same room with his parents. Which almost all children there almost all children there comes a time when they start building their own little cubbyhole. In every man, apparently, there is a gene that preserves some kind of ancient memory, telling him he ought to set up his own space. Whereupon, any adult or child heeding this call, which arises from the depths of eternity, goes about setting it up at once. Never mind how amateurish it turns out by comparison with modern apartments. A man who has built this for himself derives much more satisfaction from it than he would from the most chic and stylish apartment. And so, 9-year-old John Heitzman, who had 2 spacious rooms all to himself in the family manor, still decided to build his own house with his own hands. He constructed it out of plastic boxes that had been used for transplanting seedlings. These boxes turned out to be handy building material. They came in a variety of colors. John made the walls with blue top boxes and with a yellow border around the whole perimeter. He piled the boxes on top of each other, fastening them together in tongue and groove fashion. On one wall, John made the box bottoms face outward, which meant that the whole inside wall was comprised of a multitude of shelves. Boards with stapled plastic film served for the roof. He spent a whole week building his little house. taking advantage of the 3 hours a day he was allotted for leisure walks in the fresh air. On the seventh day, just as soon as leisure time came, he headed straight for his creation in the far corner of the garden. Pulling back the acacia bush branches, he saw the house had built. He saw the house he had built and froze in astonishment. There by the entrance stood a little girl looking in the doorway of his creation. The girl was wearing a light blue calf length skirt and a white cardigan with frills on the sleeves. Her chestnut colored hair fell in ringlets around her shoulders. At first, young John reacted with some jealousy to the presence of the stranger beside his creation, and he inquired with a hint of annoyance, "What are you doing here?" The girl turned her pretty little face toward him and replied, "I'm admiring." "What are you admiring?" "This marvelous and clever little house." What kind of house?" young John queried in amazement. "Marvelous and most clever," repeated the girl. "Houses may be marvelous, but I've never heard them called clever," observed John thoughtfully. "Only people can be clever." "Yes, of course, people can be clever, but when a clever person builds a house," the girl countered, "the house turns out to be something clever too. And when you find, and what do you find clever about this house?" "The inside wall is very clever. It has ever so many shelves. You can put a lot of useful things on those shelves, toys too." John was pleased at how this little girl reasoned things through. It flattered him, and possibly the girl herself pleased him. "She's pretty and reasons things through cleverly," he thought to himself. And aloud he said, "This house I built," and I immediately added, "What's your name?" "I'm Sally, and I'm 7 years old. I lived here in the servants' quarters since my dad works as a gardener here. He knows a lot about plants and is teaching me. I already know how to raise flowers and how to graft branches on the trees. And what's your name? And where do you live?" "I live in the manor house. My name's John." "Does that mean you're the master's son?" "Yeah. So, Johnkins, let's play house." "How do we play that?" "We play like we live in this house, the way grown-ups live. You can be the master since you're the master's son, and I'll be your servant since my dad's a servant." "That won't work," observed John. "A servant's supposed to live in the servants' quarters. Only the husband, his wife, and their children can live in the manor house." "Then I shall be your wife," exclaimed Sally, and asked, "Can I be your wife, Johnkins?" John did not answer. He went into the house, took a glance around, and he then returned to look at Sally, who was still standing just outside the doorway. He said rather brusquely, "Okay, come on in and pretend you're my wife. We have to think about how we're going to decorate the inside." Sally stepped into the house. She looked into John's eyes with tenderness and excitement and said, almost in a whisper, "Thank you, Johnkins. I shall try to be a good wife to you." John did not come to his house every day. During the time allotted for leisure walks, he was not always allowed to play in the garden. Escorted by bodyguards and tutors, he would be taken instead for a visit to a city park or Disneyland or go horseback riding. Let's pause there. But when he managed to get away to his little house, he almost always found Sally waiting for him. With each succeeding visit, John took interest in the changes that had been occurring in the house. First of all, a carpet appeared on the floor, contributed by Sally. Then little curtains on the windows and over the entrance. Next came a little round table with an empty photo frame on it. Sally said, "Johnkins, you're coming here less and less often. I keep waiting for you, but you don't show up. Give me a photograph of yourself and I'll put it in this frame. I can look at your picture and it will make it easier waiting for you." John left her his photograph. When he came to say goodbye, to the house and to Sally, he was going to be moving with his parents to another villa. Multi-billionaire John Heitzman lay on his bed in his fancy apartment and smiled as he recalled, with ever greater detail, his childhood contact with the little girl Sally. It was only now that he realized that this little girl loved him. She loved him with her first childhood love, reckless, unanswered, and sincere. Perhaps, just perhaps, he loved her too, or perhaps she was just a passing fancy. But she loved him as probably no one else would love him the rest of his life. And so the memories attached to the little house he built in the garden and his contact with Sally still evoked in him a lot of warm and pleasant feelings. These feelings warmed his body and made him feel good. After leaving the manor house, he met with Sally one more time, 11 years later. But this time, new feelings excited his whole body. John Heitzman even sat up a bit in his bed. His heart had started chasing the blood through his veins with ever increasing strength. That meeting, he had forgotten about it. He had never thought about it all this time. But now it occupied all his thoughts and made him excited. He came back to the estate where he had spent his childhood, returning after 11 years just for a day's visit. That was all the time he could afford. After lunch, he went out into the garden, and somehow he found himself heading down to the far corner of the garden, where, in among the acacia bushes, he had built his little house. As he pushed back the branches, he stepped into the little glade. He literally froze in astonishment. The house he had built out of plastic boxes 11 years ago stood on the same spot as before, but all around were little beds of flowers, and a sand-covered path led to the entrance, where a little bench was now standing, and the house itself was wreathed in flowers. The bench had not been there before, but it was there now. The grown-up John noted to himself. He pushed aside the curtain covering the entrance, bent down, and stepped into the little house. At once he could sense someone's recent presence. His childhood photo stood on the little table as before. The shelves were neatly lined with Sally's childhood toys. On one of the shelves next to the table stood a little bowl of fresh fruit. An air mattress lay on the floor, fitted with a coverlet. John stood there in the little house for about 20 minutes, remembering pleasant feelings from his childhood. Why is this happening, he thought. His family owned a whole lot of fancy villas. There was even a castle, but neither the castle nor the villas had ever evoked such pleasant feelings as arose here, in this little house constructed of plastic seedling boxes. When he came out of the little house, he spied Sally. She was standing there silently at the doorway, as though reluctant to interfere with the surge of recollections that had broken upon his thought. John looked at her and noticed her cheeks flushed with a rosy glow. She lowered her eyes in embarrassment and said in a soft, velvety, extraordinarily tender and emotional voice, "Hello, Johnnikins." He did not answer her right away. He stood there, admiring Sally's extremely beautiful, mature body. Her figure, hugging dress fluttered in the breeze. Through the light material could be seen the outlines of her sculptured form, no longer that of a child, but of a maiden, feminine and supple. "Hi, Sally," John said, breaking a long pause. "You're still keeping house here." "Yes, after all, I promised. There's some fruit inside. It's just been washed. Have some. It's for you." "I see. For me. Well then, let's go in together and have a bite." John pulled the curtains aside, letting Sally go ahead of him. She went in and squatted down. She took the bowl of fruit down from the shelf and placed it on the table beside the photograph in the frame. There were no chairs in the little house, and John sat down on the rug. He reached out for a bunch of grapes and inadvertently touched Sally's shoulder. She turned her head and their eyes met. She inhaled sharply, which caused a button to come undone on the cardigan stretched taut across her breast. John grasped hold of Sally's shoulders and drew her close to himself. She could not resist. Quite to the contrary, she leant against him with her feverishly glowing body. Sally did not resist when John slowly and carefully laid her down on the rug, or when he caressed her and kissed her lips or and her breast, and when Sally was a virgin. Neither before nor afterward did John enter into intimate relations with any virgin. And now, after 40 years had passed since that last meeting, he, John Heitzman, suddenly realized that this had been the only really beautiful, reason defying, intimate moment he had ever had with a woman, or rather, with a girl whom he had made a woman. After that, they fell asleep for a little while. When they awoke, they began talking with each other. What had they talked about? John Heitzman racked his memory as best he could. He very much wanted to remember at least part of their conversation, and he remembered. Sally had mentioned how beautiful life was. She said her father was saving up some money to buy her a plot of land, on which, if he could afford it, he would build her a modest house, and Sally herself would do the landscape design and put in a wide variety of plants, and she would lead a happy life and raise her children there. But when John decided within himself that he would help Sally, wow, he thought, there's a girl that can be happy just with some plot of land and a little house. Mere trifles. I mustn't forget to help her acquire the land and the house. But John did forget about his intentions. He forgot completely about Sally. He was distracted by his life and its manifold charms. A new yacht and his own private airplane brought joy for a few days at their first appearance. He found a longer lasting distraction in playing the money markets and adding billions to his father's financial holdings, which he subsequently inherited. A distraction which excited his nerves and feelings for more than 20 years. It dominated over everything else. He went through first one marriage, then a second, and as a matter of course, his wives left no trace of themselves behind. After he turned 40, playing the financial markets ceased to give him any pleasure, and he began to suffer increasingly frequent periods of depression, which finally led to a nervous breakdown. And now John Heitzman was no longer in a state of depression. His recollections of Sally had quite stirred him up, yet at the same time they made him angry at himself. How could this have happened, he thought. I promised myself that I would help Sally, this girl who loved me, to obtain a plot of land and a house, and I forgot. Now John Heitzman was a man accustomed to keeping his promises, especially those he had made to himself. He realized he would never stop being angry with himself until he pressed a button to summon his secretary. When the secretary entered, John Heitzman was sitting on his bed. Even though he found it difficult to get out the words for the first time in the past 6 months, he began talking. Over 50 years ago, I was living in a certain manor house. I don't remember the address. You can find it in the archives. There was a gardener working there. Don't remember his name, but it's in our archive bookkeeping accounts. The gardener had a daughter. Her name was Sally. Find out where Sally's living now. I need this information by tomorrow morning at the latest. If you have it earlier, let me know at once, regardless of the hour, day, or night. Do it. The secretary rang at dawn the next morning. As he walked into the office, John Heitzman was sitting in his wheelchair by the window wearing a dark blue three-piece suit. He was shaved and his hair neatly combed. Sir, the gardener was let go 40 years ago and died soon afterwards. Right before his death, he managed to buy 5 acres of land on an abandoned ranch in Texas. On this land, he started building a house, but broke his back during the construction and died. His daughter Sally finished building a house and now lives in it. Her address, here's the address. That's all the details we have at the moment. But on your order, we'll go ahead and gather all the information you need. John Heisman took the piece of paper from his secretary's hand and examined it carefully. After folding it neatly, he put it into his inside pocket, jacket pocket, and said, "Have the helicopter ready for takeoff in 30 minutes. It should land about 4 or 5 miles from her villa in Texas. Have a car meet me at the landing site. Just an ordinary looking car. No limousine, no bodyguards, just the driver. Do it." At 3 o'clock in the afternoon, John Heisman, limping slightly and leaning on his cane, made his way up the graveled path to a modest cottage surrounded by luscious greenery. When he first spied her, her back was turned to him. The elderly woman was standing on a small stepladder, washing the outside of a window. John Heitzman stopped and stared at this woman, and with her beautiful ash-colored hair, she could feel his gaze and turned to face him. For a while, she simply stood there, with her eyes fixed on the old man standing on the path. Then, all of a sudden, she jumped down from her ladder and ran to greet him. Her steps her step was light, and nothing about this woman looked old. She stopped about a meter from where Heitzman was standing, and in a quiet but emotional voice said, "Hello, Johnnikins." Immediately, she lowered her eyes and put up her hands to cover the blush on both her cheeks. "Hello, Sally," said John Heitzman, without another word. Or rather, he was speaking, but only to himself, not aloud. "How beautiful you are, Sally, and how beautiful are your sparkling eyes, and the little wrinkles around your eyes. You are still just as beautiful and good as before." Aloud, he said, "I was just passing through, Sally. I heard you were living here, so I decided to stop by, and maybe to stay the night. If I'm not imposing, that is. I'm so happy to see you, Johnnikins. Of course you can stay the night. I'm here alone, but tomorrow my 2 grandchildren will be arriving for a week. I've got 2 of them, a granddaughter, she's 9, and a little grandson. Well, he's 12 already. Come on in, Johnnikins, and I'll give you a bowl of herb tea. I know the kind of tea you need. Come on." "So you were married, Sally? You had children?" "I'm still married, Johnnikins," she answered cheerfully. And we had 1 son, and now 2 grandchildren. Why don't you sit down at the table out there on the porch, and I'll bring the tea out to you." John Heitzman sat down in one of the plastic armchairs on the veranda. When Sally brought out a large bowl of some kind of tea he asked her, "How come you said you knew what kind of tea I needed, Sally?" "You see, my father used to gather herbs for your father. He dried them and made them and then make a tea. And this tea was a great help for your father, and I learned how to gather herbs too. My dad told me that you too, Johnnikins, have inherited this same disease. But how did you know I was coming?" "I didn't know, Johnnikins. You see, I gather them in case of any need. But tell me, Johnnikins, how are you doing? How's your life turned out?" "In a lot of different ways, I guess. I've been busy with a variety of things, but I don't want to think about that right now. You've got a fine place here, Sally. It's beautiful. So many flowers. And a garden." "Yeah, it's really nice. I really like it here. But you see, over there to the right, they've got a building project in the works. They're planning to build a waste treatment facility, and over to the left, there there'll be another factory of some sort. They're talking about moving us out, but you're tired from your trip. Looks like you've been traveling quite a distance, Johnnikins. I could see how exhausted you are. I'll make up a bed for you by the open window. Just have a lie down and relax." Only drink up your tea first. John Heitzman got undressed with some difficulty. He really was tired, his muscles atrophied by 6 months of lying motionless in bed, could only barely keep him on his feet. He finally managed to pull the blanket over him and he fell asleep at once. Lately, he had been unable to get to sleep at all without a sleeping pill, but here, all at once, he slept until noon and did not see the morning. He got up and took a shower and then went out to the veranda. Sally was getting lunch ready in the summer kitchen, and a little boy and a little girl were helping her. Good afternoon, Johnnikins. It looks like you got a good you got a good sleep. You look so rejuvenated. Here, meet the grandchildren. This is Emmy, and this young fella's name is George, and I'm John Heitzman. Good morning, said the elderly man, extending his hand to the boy. So there you are officially introduced, declared Sally. You two go take a walk and work up an appetite while Emmy and I get lunch ready. I'd like to show you our garden, George said to Heitzman. The old man and the young boy walked through the marvelous garden together. The boy kept pointing out various plants and could not stop talking about them. Heitzman, in the meantime, was concentrating on thoughts of his own. When they reached the end of the garden, the boy announced, Now behind the acacia bush is my apartment. Grandma made it for me. Heitzman pulled aside a branch and looked. There, in a small glade beside the acacia, stood his little house, made from the same plastic seedling boxes, only the roof looked a bit different, and the curtain covering the entrance was different. Heitzman pulled back the curtain and stooped slightly as he stepped into the little house. All the furnishings were just as he remembered them, only the photograph on the table was laminated in plastic sheeting. The photo was of Sally's grandson. Everything just the way it should be, he thought. The little house now has a new occupant and hence a new photograph. Heitzman picked up the photo and held it in both hands. To make conversation, he remarked, Well, now, little George, your photo came out pretty well here, but that's not my photograph, Uncle John. That's a picture of a boy Grandma was friends with in childhood. It's just It just happens to he looks like me. John Heitzman made his way back up to the garden path as fast as his legs could carry him, limping with his cane and stumbling, panting and feeling a little confused. He approached Sally and asked, Where is he now? Where is your husband, Sally? Where? Please come down, John, she said softly. You shouldn't allow yourself to get so excited. Please sit down. It turns out, John, that back in my childhood I promised a very fine boy I would become his wife. But that was a game. John Heisman was practically shouting as he leapt up out of the chair. A children's game. Maybe so, Sally responded. Anyway, let's say I'm still continuing to play it, and I'm pretending that you're my husband and my beloved. George does not look a lot like me, the way I looked as a boy. Does he mean you gave birth? George does look a lot like me, the way I looked as a boy. Does that mean you gave birth to a child after that night, Sally? Did you have a baby? Yes, John, I had our son, and he looks like me. But he very much has your genes, and our grandson is the spitting image of you. John Heitzman John Heitzman's gaze alternated between Sally and the boy and girl setting the table out on the veranda. He was no longer able to speak. His thoughts and feelings were confused. Then, for reasons which he himself did not fully understand, he said in a businesslike tone, I have to leave right away. Goodbye, Sally. He took a couple of steps down the path, then turned and headed over to Sally, who was standing there quietly. Barely supporting himself on his cane, he got down on one knee in the front of her, took her hand, and gave it a long, slow kiss. Sally, I have some very important, urgent matters to attend to. I have to leave immediately. She put her hand on his head, softly rumpling his hair. Yes, of course. You have to leave. If you've got important matters and problems to take care of, if you run into any difficulties, John, you can always come here to our home. Our son now manages his own little firm. It's known by the lovely name of Lotos, and he does landscape design. He's had no special training, but I taught him myself, and he's doing some very smart designs, and there's hardly any shortage of orders. He helps me financially and visits me every month. But it seems you've got some money problems and something of a health problem too. Come back, John. I know how to give you treatment, and we've got enough money to live on. Thank you, Sally. Thank you. I've got to hurry. I've got to go. He walked down the path to the gate, his thoughts all caught up in a plan he had in mind. In the meantime, Sally watched John's receding figure and whispered to herself, Come back, my love. She was still repeating this phrase like a mantra, even an hour later, forgetting about her grandchildren. She did not even notice the helicopter circling for more than half an hour overhead, over, over her plot of land and its little house and marvelous garden. By the time John Heitzman's helicopter landed on the office tower roof, his close associates and their secretaries were already hard at work in the boardroom, feverishly checking figures, getting ready to report to the boss. They had grown unaccustomed to meeting in his presence, and now it was with considerable fear and trepidation that they awaited his arrival. When John Heisman entered the room, everybody rose to their feet. He began speaking even before reaching his chair at the head of the boardroom table. Sit down. No reports today. Listen carefully to what I have to say. I'm not going to repeat myself. No time. So, in Texas, there's this villa. Here's the name. Here's the address. Your instructions are to buy up all the lands around this house within a radius of 100 miles. Buy up all the industries located on these lands, even if it means paying 3 times their worth. Whichever one of you is responsible for buying and selling real estate can leave the room now and go to work immediately. Put all our agents on the job if required. This operation should take no more than 1 week. One of the associates jumped up and hurried toward the exit. John Heitzman continued. All buildings, factories, and facilities located on these lands are to be demolished within a month max, even if this means hiring hundreds of construction companies. A month from now, grass should be planted on these sites. Heitzman instructed the last associate remaining in the room. There's a firm in Texas with the pretty name of Lotos. Sign a 5-year contract with it. Engage this firm to design communities for all the lands we buy up around the villa in Texas. Whatever the firm asks, double it. Do it. 2 weeks later, John Heitzman appeared before an audience of 1,500 people. The audience, recruited with the help of personal firms, comprised landscape design specialists, botanists, and agronomists. Everyone wanted to get work, especially since the advert mentioned the contract amount, twice the standard average. John Heitzman walked up to the podium and began speaking in his usual authoritative tone, which was rather sharp. According to the contracts being offered you, each of you will receive free of charge a plot of land for lifetime use, measuring 5 acres. You'll be offered several designs for prefab homes to choose from, and these homes will be built on each plot of whatever spot you designate. All of my company's all at my company's expense. For the next 5 years, the company will make payments to each adult member of your family as specified in the contract. Your job is to make the territory you receive a place of beauty. You will plant gardens and flower beds and make ponds and pathways. You will make everything beautiful and good. The company will pay the cost of seedlings and whatever seed materials you request. That's it. If there are no questions, those who wish to accept my offer can sign their contract. But the 1,500 seat auditorium was enshrouded in utter silence. Nobody got up from their seats to head over to the tables where secretaries were waiting with contracts ready to sign. After a minute complete silence, an elderly man rose from his seat and asked, "Tell me, sir, these lands where you propose we settle, are they contaminated with deadly pollutants?" "No," replied one of Heitzman's associates. "On the contrary, this whole area has a completely clean environment and the soil is quite fertile." "Then tell us honestly," asked a young woman, jumping up from her seat, "what kind of experiment are you proposing to conduct on people? Many of us have children, and I, for one, do not want to subject my child to goodness knows what kind of experiment." The hall erupted with a good general buzz, and cries of opportunist, inhuman, monster could be heard. People started getting up and filing toward the exit. Heitzman's associates tried to explain and respond to the questions, but to no avail. Heitzman himself sat there helplessly and watched the people leave the room. He realized that their departure was the final blow to his hopes, or something even worse. He said he so wanted to do something nice for Sally, for his son and grandchildren. He wanted not only for there to be no more belching smokestacks in the vicinity of Sally's cozy cottage, but for there to be gardens around and good neighbors too. He had been he had bought up the lands, and the belching smokestacks had been demolished on his orders, and grass had been sown in their place. But the land could only become good if good people lived on it, and here they were leaving. They did not understand. How could they understand anyway? What could make them believe? Stop. All at once it dawned on him. They knew nothing about the situation, and that was why they did not believe. But now, if he told them the truth. John Heitzman rose to his feet and quietly, still hesitantly, began to speak. "People," he began, "I understand. I need to explain to you the reasons for this action by my company. But they're impossible to explain. There's no way they can be explained because it's just that you see, it's like this, or rather, there's something personal to me in all these contracts, or how shall I put it?" Heitzman was confused and did not know how to continue, but the people had stopped in their tracks. They were standing in the aisles, in the exit doorways, and they were all looking intently at Heitzman. They were silent, and here he was, not knowing how to proceed. Yet somehow he managed to pull himself together and go on. "Back in my childhood, in my youth, you see, I loved this girl, but I didn't realize back then I was in love with her. I was later married to other women. I got involved in business. For the past 50 years, I never saw this girl, never even thought about her. And then, just recently, I remembered her. I discovered she was the only person who ever sincerely loved me, and she still does. But I didn't know about it. Like I said, I'd forgotten about her, and I realized that she was the only one I could ever love. And then I met her. Now, of course, she's along in years, but for me, she's still the same as back when I knew her years before. She loves her garden. She does everything so beautifully, and I wanted there to be beauty around her and good neighbors. It's better for her to have good and happy neighbors living nearby. But how to make that happen? As a businessman, I've managed to put a bit of money aside, and so I bought up the land, divided it into plots, and drew up these contracts. I did it for the one I love. Or maybe, just maybe, I did it for myself. This last sentence John uttered almost as though putting the question to himself. After that, he began speaking as though talking aloud to himself, as though he did not see the people standing in front of him. We live for something. What do we live for? We strive for something. What is it we're striving for? I'm going to die soon, and what am I leaving behind except dust? But now, I'm not going to die. Not until I finish my project, and I'll leave behind something eternal. I'll leave behind a garden for the one I love. I'll leave behind many gardens. First, I wanted to simply hire a whole lot of workers and sign a contract with a big company doing landscape design. Sign a contract so the employees could look after the plants. But then it dawned on me any kind of beauty will turn out lifeless if you don't create it for yourself. And that's why I decided to make it so that someone created it for themselves. That's why I'm offering you the plots of land and the houses, and all I ask in return is for beauty around the one I love. You didn't believe that the terms offered in these contracts were genuine. You didn't know what goals the party offering you these contracts was really pursuing. Now you know. At this point, John Heitzman felt silent. The people standing in the hall were silent too. The first to break the silence was the woman who had expressed the most skepticism earlier. First, she hurried over to the row of tables standing by the stage with the contracts laid out and asked one of the secretaries to enter her name on a copy, which she signed without even reading it. Then she turned to the people standing in the auditorium and exclaimed, "There, I've signed it. I was the first one to sign. That means I'll go down in history because I was the first." When you think about it, not a single man, no matter how rich, has ever given a greater gift to one he loves than this person standing there on the stage, and it would be impossible for him to do more. Nobody could even think of doing more, cried another woman, in the whole recorded history of mankind. "I love you," called out a third. "I want a plot right next to your beloved," declared a fourth. "What's her name?" "Her name," began Heitzman, but went on, "Maybe it's better she doesn't know. Let her think that this was all the will of fate." With a single surge, the people in the hall headed over to the table standing by the stage. A queue formed. People gaily joked with each other, calling each other simply neighbor, but the majority, especially the women, kept staring at the man on the stage with sparkles of love in their eyes. For the first time in his life, John Heitzman felt the energy of good directed at him, the energy of love and unfeigned delight emanating from many human hearts, an all triumphant energy capable of healing any ill. He walked off the stage, now without a trace of a limp. For several months, he personally took active part in the demolition of the remaining facilities on the bought up lands, discussed the details of design of the whole community around Sally's cottage, and alternative landscape designs for different plots along the whole infrastructure. A year later, when John Heitzman once again approached the gate leading to Sally's cottage, as far as the eye could see, people were already planting little saplings for their large gardens. Several saplings stood near Sally's gate, with a carefully wrapped root system. It seemed as though Sally had intuitively felt him coming, for she ran out to greet him. "John, it's so good to see you again. Really good. Hello there, John." She ran up to him with a spring in her step, bubbling over like a little girl. She grasped John's arm, pulled him over to have a cup of tea. All of a sudden, all the while happily chattering away non-stop. "You know what's been happening, John. You know what a miracle's been taking place here all around. I'm so superbly happy. There'll be no more belching smokestacks next to our house. There'll be good neighbors. See how life's sprucing up all around? Really sprucing up. If you've had any business failures, John, don't worry your little head about it. You can just laugh at it, and come and move in with us. We're wealthy now. Our son's just got himself a really big contract, and I mean big. He's now in charge of a whole design and planning project, and we've got ourselves a little more land. Our son's going to be building himself a new house, and the two of us, if you want, can live here. I do want to, replied John Heitzman, adding, "Thank you, Sally, for the invitation. But why go on living in an old house?" boomed out a voice from behind John Heitzman's back. He turned around and caught sight of his son. He knew right off that it was his son, and the young man continued, "If I understood correctly, you are actually my father. When little George told me that you thought the photo of Mom's childhood friend was of him, I knew you who'd come. And Mom never did learn to hide her true feelings. I, of course, don't yet have the same feelings towards you that Mom does, but for the sake of my happy parents, I am ready to pay for the building of a new house for the two of you." "Thank you, son," said John Heitzman, almost overcome with emotion. He wanted to give his son a hug, but for some reason hesitated. The young man stepped toward him on his own, extended his hand, and introduced himself. "I'm John." "Great," said Sally, "and it's great now that you two have gotten acquainted. When you get to know each other better, you'll really like each other. But right now, let's have some tea." And as they sat at the table, Sally kept on talking animately, animate, animatedly, nonstop, about the extraordinary events that had been taking place in the last few months. Can you Can you just imagine, John? Just imagine. Here, they've been telling a story like the most beautiful tale in the world, a tale which is coming true to life. Just imagine, John. People say that all these lands were bought by one and the same person. Then this person invited the best designers and agronomists and gardeners and gave each of them several acres of land free of charge for their lifetime use. He told them to make their plots beautiful, and he offered them all the saplings and seeds free of charge, and will even keep on paying them for 5 years to beautify their own plots. Just imagine you, if it, just imagine it is he who will be paying them. He poured all his savings into this project, right down to the last cent. "Well, maybe not all," Heitzman protested. "People say he put in all. And you know why he did all this?" "Why?" asked John Heitzman calmly. "That's the whole beauty of it. He did it so that the one he loved could have a place to live amidst all this beauty. They say she's a landscape designer as well, and somewhere around here she's got a cottage too. Only nobody knows who she is or where she lives. Can you imagine, Johnnikins? What will happen when people find out who she is? What? What else? Everybody will want to go have a look at her and even touch her like a goddess. I myself, for instance, would want to touch her. She's probably an extraordinary woman. Maybe she's extraordinarily outwardly, maybe inwardly. Everybody around is saying that there's no other woman in the world who could inspire a man to take such an unusual and beautiful step. That's why all the people will want to see her and even touch this man and his extraordinary wife." "Probably they will," John Heitzman agreed, adding, "but what can we do about it, Sally?" "What do you mean, we?" Sally wondered aloud. "I say we because the extraordinary woman, the one on whose accounts all these things around are happening, is you, Sally." Sally stared at John without blinking, trying to make sense of what she had just heard. When the first glimpses of understanding dawned on her, she let the cup she was holding slip out of her hands, but nobody paid attention to the sound of it breaking to pieces. John Heitzman turned his head in the direction of another sound, the sound of a chair falling, when his son impulsively jumped up from his seat. The younger John rushed over to his father and said excitedly, in a soft baritone voice, "Father, Father, can I give you a hug?" Pause. Just a little extra intermission. Oops, I am daring. Just got knocked over, but it's standing upright. "Father, Father, can I give you a hug?" John Heitzman was the first to embrace his son. He could hear how his son's heart was racing. His son gave him a hug in turn, whispering excitedly, "The world has never witnessed such a powerful declaration of love," without even using the words of love, ever. "I'm proud of you, Father. I'm so happy for you, Father." When father and son turned to Sally, she was still trying to come to terms with what had happened. All at once, her cheeks flushed with a rosy glow, as though smoothing out the wrinkles around her eyes. Tears began rolling down her cheeks. Sally was embarrassed. She rushed over to the elder John, grabbed him by the arm, and led him down the front porch steps. Their son watched as his parents, hand in hand, started making their way slowly down the path, heading for their acacia bushes, which concealed the little house of their childhood, and then began skipping toward the acacia like youngsters. 10 years later, a much younger looking John Heitzman was sitting at a local cafe bar with some other men from the community. He laughingly explained, "No, I won't run for any presidential office. Don't even try to tempt me. And it's not just a matter of age. You don't have to be president to run the country. That's something you can do from right in your own garden. See, you've shown by your own example how to really make a good life. And all America is now turning into a flourishing garden. If it goes on like this, heck, we'll even overtake Russia. We'll do it. We'll do it," echoed Sally, who had just come in. "Only now, let's head for home, Johnnikins. The baby won't go to sleep without you." Then she added, whispering in his ear, "And neither will I." And so they began walking home down a shady, sweet smelling alley. These two not yet old people, John Heitzman and Sally. In the springtime, it always seemed that their life was just beginning, just as real life was beginning all over America. "That's a beautiful ending to your story," I told Anastasia, when she had finished telling her account of the future, "and all your stories are so encouraging. But will something like that really happen in real life?" "It will definitely happen, Vladimir. That is no made up story, but a projection of the future. The names and locales are not important. What is important is the essence, the idea, the dream. And if my story has evoked positive feelings, then people will certainly project its essence into the future, and many people will add their own details and infuse their projection with their own great meaning and conscious awareness." How does all that come about? See how simple it is? Did you like the story? Did I like it? I'll say. Do you want it to come true in the future? Of course I do. What if you tell it to others? Will there be those who will want to see something like that come true too? I dare say there will. You see, that means that anybody will want to who takes on the role not just of an observer of history, but an actual participant in it. And they will make the story come true. Yes, I think that's clear enough, but I'm just a bit sad that you went and painted such a beautiful scene in respect to foreign entrepreneurs rather than Russians. Vladimir, for Russians, life is already drawing beautiful and real scenes all on its own. Or, to put it more accurately, many Russians are working out the divine eternity. And that is something you could tell about all by yourself. By myself, well, I guess so. I really do not quite, I really do know quite a few Russian entrepreneurs who have taken not just one, but several hectares of land and are building their domains on them, like the ones you described, only their stories aren't as romantic. Grand chapters need to be written about anyone who has made conscious contact with the earth. Such a story will be inexhaustible. Look, here is just one story. See if you can recognize some familiar names. The Billionaire story. And I may read the next chapter because I'm just curious. Uh-oh, this looks like the battery's about to go dead, and it looks like I've been reading this billionaire story for almost 1 hour and 45 minutes. This is Behind the Scenes with George.